we had over 250 some selections, and 12 of those were the Colts. They were able to just go, do what they've always done, kind of in draft day, is turn however many picks into just basically not really doubling their
army.
picks, but yeah, getting a nice little contingent coming in to Lucas Oil Stadium in 2023. Looking at the selections for the Colts, round 1, pick 4, they go out and get Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of Florida. Great selection there. Last season in Gainesville, he completed 54% of his passes for 2,549 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 picks. He also ran for 654 yards and 9 touchdowns. Round 2, pick 45, Kansas State cornerback Julius Brents goes to the Horseshoe. He was a 2022 first-team member of the Big 12, all Big 12 team. 4 interceptions. That was tied for 3rd in the Big 12. Round 3, pick 79. The Colts go out and get North Carolina wide receiver Josh Downs, who had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons the last couple of years. He had 1,335 yards, 8 touchdowns in 2021. Follows that up with 1,029 yards, 11 touchdowns in 2022. He was a 2-time recipient of first-team All-ACC honors and had the second most receptions in FBS the past 2 seasons with 195. His player comp is Tyler Lockett, which, heck, if you play fantasy football, you know how electric Tyler Lockett can be to have on your team. Round 4, the Colts were able to get 2 picks in that round, fairly close to each other. At 106, they get BYU offensive tackle Blake Freeland. At 110, they get Northwestern defensive end Adetomiwa Adibare. Made sure and went to NFL.com to make sure I had the pronunciation right there. He was an honorable mention, all Big Ten member in 2022. He led the Wildcats in sacks with 5, 38 tackles, 9 for loss, and 2 forced fumbles in the 2022 campaign. Then 4 picks for the Colts in round 5. At 138, they get South Carolina cornerback Darius Rush. He had 15 pass breakups, 3 picks throughout his career. He had a career-high 38 tackles in 2022. His player comp is Richard Sherman, according to CBS, so that's some high praise there. If the Colts can get...
Hey, that's a Gus Bradley guy for you.
For sure. Round 5, pick 158, the Colts get Cal safety Daniel Scott. No relation to B. Scott there. Top 5 in the Pac-12 in INTs last year with 3. He had 2 forced fumbles, which also had him in the top 5 in that category last year. Round 5, pick 162, the Colts get Miami tight end Will Mallory, who was a member of the 2022 second-team All-ACC squad, 538 yards and 3 touchdowns last season. He's among the FBS tight ends for the last 2 seasons. He's top 10 there, as far as receiving yards. Round 5, pick 176. You have Northwestern running back Evan Hall. He had 1,009 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2021, 913 yards and 5 touchdowns last season, 546 yards and 2 touchdowns came in the passing game for Evan Hall last season. His player comp is Rex Burkhead, which was a good, kind of out of the backfield, target with the Patriots. Round 6, pick 211, the Colts get Wagner linebacker Titus Leo. Round 7, pick 221, the Colts nab Texas A&M cornerback Jalen Jones, who allowed no touchdowns, and quarterbacks had a 38.5% completion percentage with throwing his way in 2022, so a real lockdown player. I mean, that's numbers in the ACC right there. Which is pretty incredible. And then rounding out the Colts draft, round 7, pick 236 is Northern Michigan offensive tackle Jake Witt. So there you go, 12 players on their way to the Circle City. And when we look at a grade for this draft, I was trying to think of where I wanted to go with it. Last season, I gave Ballard a solid B. This year, I'm going B+. I know I've seen some places that give him, an A minus. I'll get to why it's not that here in a second. But you look at the average grade of the top 6 players for the Colts this year. through which goes through the start of round 5. ESPN graded them out on an average of a B. It's like right at 80%. And I mean, they went right down the line as far as getting the team's biggest needs. I mean, I talked about in our draft preview show for the Colts that, they needed a quarterback, a cornerback, a wide receiver, an offensive lineman, and they went in that order too. They were like, okay, what's the checklist? All right, we got our quarterback. Hey, we got our wide receiver. Or hey, we got a cornerback. Hey, we got our offensive lineman. There are some things I thought like I could nitpick. That I thought, hey, I'd rather see this player in a Colts uniform. Like for instance, Joey Porter Jr. or Keely Ringo at the cornerback position. I talked about Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee as a sleeper there. But to those points, I mean, Julius Brents is the tallest of the cornerback prospects in the top 10, and which I mean is a huge attribute to have, being one of the tallest guys in that category, and he's still a great prospect. So, not like the Colts didn't get a great player in Julius Brents, and then Josh Downs was actually ranked higher than Hyatt by CBS. So, I try to find some things to be critical because I was like, am I being too soft? Given because I feel like I've given Ballard a B like the last few years, and so I was like, am I being too soft? And so that's what I was kind of looking at there even when I try to nitpick the draft, I've ended up being like, okay, actually no, that was a good pick. Oh yeah, no, I actually like that pick now that I think about it a little bit more. All in all, this was a typical Ballard draft where he ended up with a boatload of draft capital. And brought in a lot of strong talent and depth and hit on all the team needs exactly. I went through our old outlines and looked at the other draft grades I've given out. I was afraid I was being too critical, like I said. First year we did grades was 2020, and that was the Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman draft. I gave that one an A, so I was like, okay, based on that curve, I don't know if I quite want to go with an A for this one. It's definitely close to that mark. It's probably the closest we've been to that mark. I gave 2021 a C, 2022 a B, so I feel better about a B plus here. So it's right there on that threshold of being an A minus B plus. But needless to say, I was pessimistic about this draft, and I definitely am not coming out on the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean, this draft, I was telling you off air, I thought Chris Ballard, outside of the Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman draft, I mean, because that obviously yielded two really good talents. I felt he knocked this one out of the park. I mean, he hit on every team need. He brought in, got good value. I feel like with some of these picks where he ended up getting them, like Julius Brents. I didn't think he would be available. Like for them to trade back twice and for him to still be available. I know everybody thought the Colts loved Keely Ringo. He would have been a good pickup as well. Julius Brents has the size though, and I think one of the deciding factors also he is an Indianapolis native. He's a graduate of Warren Central High School, so that always helps as well. But and that obviously probably wasn't the deciding factor. There was other reasons, but this just draft, I'm going to give it a solid A because when I start going through it, I look at like obviously Anthony Richardson I thought was a great pick. I mean, he's going to take a little bit of time to develop, but the Colts having Gardner Minshew does afford that ability, and also because the Colts aren't in a win now mode. But Anthony Richardson paired with Shane Steichen, this is going to has the potential to be a really, really good pickup. I mean, Anthony Richardson's comp by a lot of people on ESPN on draft day, they were comparing him to Cam Newton with a little bit of a higher upside. So that's actually really exciting to see. And then being able to get Josh Downs in the third round, I mean, I thought he would be going about where the Colts were picking originally in the second round. So being able to pick him up there is great. Blake Freeland is a guy that I was really hoping the Colts would land. He's a super athletic tackle. He's really good in the run block, which is, hey, that's great with Jonathan Taylor. He does have to get a little bit better with his pass blocking, but that's fine. Honestly, Blake Freeland, if he could add about 20 more pounds to his frame, he could potentially be a starting tackle on this offensive line. I don't know too much about the Ade Tamiwa Adebare pick. Because when you watch Northwestern, they weren't very good this year. So nothing really stood out there. I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't consistently watching Northwestern because of that. Darius Rush, he's such an interesting prospect to me because he came into college. He started off as a wide receiver and just recently made the switch to cornerback. He's got amazing speed. He was graded out as one of the fastest corners at the combine this year. So that's really great. Daniel Scott is interesting to me as well. He's going to be a key special teams player, but he's also one of those guys that he can step back in the safety role or he can come up and play in the slot at corner as well. And honestly, I kind of hope he makes a good name for himself because I would love to buy a Daniel Scott jersey, just to have a jersey that says Scott and actually be a player on the team. Will Mallory, that was an interesting pick. You kind of laughed at me when I said the Colts should pick a tight end. You said that's a full room. You're right, it is. Will Mallory, though, graded out as one of the faster tight ends in the draft. Also, fun fact, he is the grandson of the late Indiana football coach, Bill Mallory. So a little bit of a tie there. Evan Hall, I love this pick. He kind of fits into the scheme a little bit of where Nyheim Hines has been in the past. He is a good running back, but he's more well known for his pass catching abilities out of the backfield. So I can't wait to see what they do with him. Wagner linebacker Titus Leo. I feel like this could be one of those picks that, Chris Ballard always finds a diamond in the rough. And that kind of is what this pick is. And then Texas A&M quarterback Jalen Jones. I mean, for somebody that, was pretty much a shutdown corner in the SEC to fall to the 7th round, that's really interesting to me. And then Jake Witt, another athletic offensive lineman coming from Northern Michigan. There's not much tape or numbers on him because he's coming from Northern Michigan. They just didn't have much info. But I love that pick as well. Good value in the 7th round. Look, the Colts, what the big theme of the draft for them this year was athletic ability. This team, the Colts put together one of the most athletic hauls in the 2023 NFL draft. If you look at the relative athletic scores for the players that the Colts picked up, Anthony Richardson with a perfect score of 10, Julius Brents with a 9.99, Josh Downs with an 8.99, Blake Freeland with a 9.83, Adetamwa 9.72, Darius Russ 9.8, Daniel Scott 9.94, Will Mallory 9.05, Evan Hall 9.32, Titus Leo 8.48, Jalen Jones 8.79, and there wasn't a relative score for Tyler Witt because Jake Witt, just because there was not any, he was not at the combine and there wasn't really any information available for him. But I mean, this just shows that Ballard was looking to bring in an influx of elite athletes in this draft, and he accomplished that hands down. And as I said, you can see in the relative athletic score, the Colts, I feel like, knocked this one out of the park and were one of the better drafting teams this year.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about all that athleticism, and that's what really makes me excited to watch these guys get on the field because especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, it really feels like the Colts are starting to get a strong core for the future. It finally after last season you didn't really know what direction the Colts were going in. Now you finally kind of see a direction, and I'm excited to watch a lot of these guys get on the field. I mean, first and foremost, Anthony Richardson. I think he might be the most excited. I'm you know, I, yeah, I'm probably the most excited to see him get on the field. I know that's kind of the
Yeah.
obvious, the obvious one getting off the jump here, but touched on it last week. You touched on it as well. His player comp was Cam Newton on CBS. His comp on ESPN is Josh Allen. And most importantly, it was noted in his post-draft analysis that by ESPN that he has similar traits to Jalen Hurts, who Shane Steichen turned into a Super Bowl caliber quarterback this past season. You touched on Gardner Minshew as well. I'm really, I say I'm excited to watch Anthony Richardson. I'm actually hoping that I'll be seeing Gardner Minshew for the first, few weeks as, Anthony Richardson develops. And I think it also
Hey, and
matters that.
Jim Irsay has come out and said that it is or Irsay and Ballard have come out and said it is ultimately up to Coach Steichen of when the reins will be handed over to Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and what I think it makes it all that more better is the fact that Minshew played for the Eagles last season. He was in Shane Steichen's system, and that may even help kind of accelerate the learning curve that Anthony Richardson is going to have and the developmental curve, because hey, if he's got any issues, he's got a guy right in that room aside from Steichen who can be like, hey, this is how things are done. So that's really something that could be cool. I could see the plan being starting Minshew Mania until the bye week. Usually the Colts have a later bye week, so I can see hey, it's week 10. The Colts are going into their bye week. They're whatever, or maybe even whatever week they play on Thursday. That could also be an option as well. They're gearing up for a Thursday night game. They play their Thursday night game against the Broncos, a rematch of the greatest Thursday night game of all time.
You're bringing up. I saw a TikTok recently, just this a couple days ago, of somebody saying, great, here's a potential Thursday night matchup we can see in the future: Will Levis versus Anthony Richardson. 4 touchdowns thrown to 6 interceptions combined with 2 quarterbacks, because the biggest knock on both of those quarterbacks obviously was accuracy.
Right.
So yeah, that's a potential Thursday night matchup, because that's one we've seen before, the Titans and the Colts, several times.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it could be either like basically the second bye that you get with that, or you could see after their actual bye. So that's a really cool thing. Richardson's an elite athlete. He's gonna go into the season with a lot of talent at his disposal. I mean, looking at just kind of down the roster, I mean, hopefully you're gonna get a full season of a healthy JT. You've got Zach Moss, who at the end of the season showed flashes. You bring in Hall. Josh Downs joins a wide receiver core of Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Isaiah McKenzie. You did mention the full tight end room. It's headlined by Kylan Grants and Jelani Woods. Unfortunately, I can kind of see Mo Alley Cox kind of being on that edge of being
but
pushed.
He is your best inline blocker in that room,
right? So I don't
veteran presence. I mean, so that's what's really tough, is like, if you're gonna go for a running game, like an RPO type,
yeah, that's true,
strategy. I mean, Mo Alley Cox right there is one of your better blockers at tight end, whereas that's where Will Mallory was one of the weakest. He's not a very good blocker, but so I don't know, that it's going to be interesting, because that room is very crowded.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like this is the right system for Anthony Richardson. And there's a great young core around him for him to thrive in. So really excited to see him. And that's there's a lot of exciting things about what they did on defense as well. I mean, Adetamewa Adebare, he's got great strength and speed. Ran the fastest. We've talked about athleticism a lot tonight already. He ran the fastest 40-yard dash of any player over 280 pounds since 2006 at the Compound earlier this year. Exactly.
Athletes.
And not only that, not only is he quick, but he's got versatility. He can play on the edge. He can move inside a defensive tackle. You love that versatility, and which is great, because you have an already great D line that the Colts are already. You have a lot of great players on that defensive line for the Colts, and so that now that you bring in another guy who can kind of move around and be plugged in where he's needed, that just makes him all that more better. So I mean, there's a lot of players to be excited about for the Colts this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on offense, you look at Anthony Richardson first and foremost. But for me, I'm really kind of looking at Josh Downs as my player I'm most excited for. Everybody thought when Will McKenzie or Isaiah McKenzie was brought in that he was going to be the starter from the get-go, the replacement of Paris Campbell. I'm not 100% sure of that anymore because of what Josh Downs brings to the table. I mean, he has great control of his body. He knows how to make contested catches, whether it's on the outside, the inside, across the middle. I mean, he's going to be a fun one to watch. I mean, when we look at his size and everything, is I think his biggest comparable is T.Y. Hilton for this team because look, when T.Y. was drafted, I said it. I didn't think he was going to be much of anything more than a glorified punt returner. Josh Downs can do that as well. So I mean, Josh Downs has the ability. I think is going to give the Colts something that they haven't had since T.Y. Hilton was kind of more in his prime. Something that we all thought Paris Campbell could become, but just couldn't stay healthy. Um, yeah, so I'm really excited to see what kind of element Josh Downs brings to this Colts offense, especially with the way Shane Steichen's going to run it. I can't wait. Can I say Shane Steichen as the player I'm most excited
Yeah.
to see on offense, even though he's the head coach? I can't wait to see what he is able to do, the kind of offense he chooses to run with this team, just based off of what we saw from Philadelphia recently. On defense, the player that I'm most excited to watch there is South Carolina cornerback Darius Rush. Like I said, he used to play wide receiver, switched over to corner. One of the things about him is he he's not a clean route runner with wide receivers all the time, but he's got the speed to make up for that. He ran like, in the 4.3 range for the 40 at the combine. So he's fast. So he's got the speed. He knows how to high point a ball. His background as a wide receiver is going to pay dividends here for him because he's got that size, he's got the speed, and he can think like a wide receiver. So I'm really excited to watch him. I guess second for me would obviously be Julius Brents, just because of his size as well. I mean, look, Gus Bradley has he's going to making over this secondary here. He's bringing in the players that he like the attributes that he likes in his secondary players, and that's length. And this draft for the Colts was not lacking in length in the defensive secondary for sure.
So before we move on to the draft as a whole, one final kind of question here on a scale of hot to cold. What's your level of optimism from this draft? For me, it's warm. As I noted before, I went in the draft very pessimistic. As we all know, I said, Ballard addressed all the Colts' needs. He didn't do anything crazy, and he came away with 12 picks. I said it before that. I said it last week that, or maybe it was during the Colts draft preview, that I said like it basically my optimism level all hinges on the first pick, and a lot of the pessimism came from the discussion and the talks and the rumors that the Colts were going to take Will Levis. I did not want Will Levis. I thought yes, you have your obvious 1 and 2 in Stroud and Young. You have your and then after that you have Richardson Levis, and then after that there's another drop off. And I thought between those two, Richardson, I kind of came around on Richardson. I talked myself into it. Not, and I feel different from the time from last year when I talked myself into Matt Ryan. Last year, I didn't like the decision to go get Matt Ryan. I talked myself into it, and then my gut instinct was right all along. Not necessarily that he'd be that bad, but that he wasn't the solution the Colts necessarily needed. This year, I was so excited to potentially get Stroud, and then once that was off the board, I kind of got pessimistic. But then I looked at Richardson and Levis. I came around on Richardson. So when all the discussion was, oh hey, the Colts are going to take Levis, I was like, please do not take Will Levis. I mean, if you need any bigger red flag, he puts mayo in his coffee. That's all you need to know about him. And so
Well, no, actually, if you listen to what some of the guys were like, Mel Kiper and them were talking about, with one of the biggest reasons he fell was teams just get turned off by some of the stuff that they saw from him,
yeah.
such as the mirror selfies, his infatuation with the gun show with his arms. It's like, look, tight like quarterbacks don't look like that anymore. Like even like the Peyton Mannings of the world, they didn't. they weren't like ripping these huge biceps or anything. So the infatuation he had with himself was something that really turned teams off and was one of the key contributors to why he fell.
Right.
They just like if you're 2-2 yourself, how are you going to be able to handle leading a team?
But yeah, to tie a bow on it, that my pessimism was that I didn't want the Colts to draft Will Levis. I knew the fourth pick was going to kind of set the tone for how the draft was going to go and how I was going to view the draft. And so when it got off hot with them getting Richardson, I felt pretty good from there on out. So yeah, no, I'm back into positive vibes, positive spirits when it comes to the Colts.
So for me, I'm warmer than warm, but not hot. I'm kind of somewhere in between. That perfect place where you get in the shower and it's like, yeah, this is a perfect temperature. Um, I say that because the Colts, they answered a lot of questions, filled in a lot of needs, but they are still in a position where we all kind of know, like we can all see a general direction they're going in, which is great. That's what the Colts needed. They needed a vision. The Colts have a vision now. They know the direction they want to go in, and it's eventually we're going to get there. It's just be prepared for another bumpy season. And I'm kind of happy about that, just based off of the prospects coming into next year's draft, which is absolutely loaded. Now the Colts, most likely, if you know, even just because they be possibly picking in the top 5, top 10, doesn't mean they need a quarterback. Um, we can't be a Tennessee and draft a new quarterback in hopes that that's the replacement every year. But the Colts have the opportunity, to gain these young guys experience and still be able to build for the future to become a legitimate long-term Super Bowl contender. And that makes me very optimistic about the future. Does that make me? Am I optimistic as far as wins go for this next season? No, I'm not. Um, but that it in the long run, that's actually a good thing. So, but hey, if I'm proven wrong and the Colts come out and look a ton better and make the playoffs, I'll be like, hey, that's fine because that means the development of these players is ahead of schedule. Yeah, did we miss out on a player like Marvin Harrison Jr.? Yeah, we did. But hey, it's okay because um, things are looking better now. So I think it's going to be a win-win regardless
Oh yeah, I like I
next
said,
season.
I think it finally seems like the Colts have a direction where for a lot of last year in this offseason to start off with, it did not look like that was
And
going to
the
be the case.
Colts actually have a quarterback that's different. It's different for the Colts. I mean, Andrew Luck was probably the most athletic quarterback the Colts have had in recent memory. And I mean, by no means was he like a tuck it and run as much as he can type player. He did out of necessity, and look where that got him. But the Colts like recently have just been bringing in these statues almost. So it's going to be really interesting to watch a player like Anthony Richardson under center with the Colts. And I mean, oh my gosh, him and Jonathan Taylor, that tandem has the potential to be one of the best QB running back tandems in the NFL because now with Anthony Richardson out there, defenses are going to have to pause for a second when he goes to hand off the ball because is he keeping it? Is he really handing it to Jonathan Taylor? They have to read the moment, and that's going to give either one of them enough time to put up some pretty big numbers. So I read somewhere somebody say, yeah, Jonathan Taylor's touches may decrease, but ultimately could see his yardage go up because of the threat of Anthony Richardson running.
I like that you brought up Andrew Luck because that's another thought that I had, I think either yesterday morning or this morning, where I was like, hopefully Richardson can come out and be, I mean, obviously he's not the prospect that Andrew Luck was, but hopefully he can come out and be good, because I am so tired of Ryan Grigson getting credit for drafting Andrew Luck. So hopefully now, drafting Anthony Richardson, he can become a good enough player to where that kind of quiets that part of the Grigson is better than Ballard tandem there. So hopefully that can be the case.